Welcome back to the Shabbat Treasures series. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, and I'm here together with my co-host,
Rabbi Samuel Ross, and we are delighted to be able to share a weekly idea that you can take into your Shabbos and upgrade and beautify immediately. Enjoy. But what we did over the first 10 weeks was an introduction to Shabbos, but it was more than that. What we really did was we looked at largely the rabbinic laws of Shabbos. And they're very not just important than the rabbinic laws, but they're a big introduction to a lot of what we're about to do. We're about to move into the biblical laws, and we'll get into them tonight already. But within the biblical laws, we're going to see aspects that are going to be muksa and so on and so forth that were part of the rabbinical ones. So with no further ado, we are about to move into Shabbos Treasures Week 11, and we are about to learn about plowing.
Now, before you all leave and think, not a farmer, nothing to do with me.
Are none of you farmers? Not even one of you? Like, come on. Like out there in Blackley or in Middleton, like there's no farmers?
No.
No, apparently there's no farmers.
No, apparently there are no farmers on the group.
No farmers. Are we farmers? Not as far as I know. Anyway.
No. So we're going to look at the original melacha, which is why would plowing be a problem? And then we're going to move on and say, what does it have to do with our lives, right? So some of you, if you're not farmers, you may be into gardening, you may from time to time do plowing, but what we're actually going to see is that there are times when it is applicable when you're going around your daily day. Apparently there are places where the sun shines from time to time and you can go in the garden and you might on the Shabbat afternoon want to drag a chair on mud. Is that something that would be considered plowing? Any thoughts?
We're getting a nod from over there.
A nod, yes, one yes.
So possibly we'll have to see why that would be. What exactly is plowing that could relate to that?
What about, and this is a question I think that came up in one of the earlier series, is what about digging in a sandbox? Is that something that would be a problem under this, what plowing is?
No.
We have a vote for no. We're gonna
have to see some of the reasons and everything else. Maybe another quick question or two, just to get them thinking.
And then what about something like turning soil is plowing? So if you drag the chair and moves the mud, we've got someone on here who knows who's on it. We're going to come to it. Great point. We will come to it.
But the truth is, we're going to have to define plowing, meaning we may even find that less than that may be plowing. But that is a really, really important point that Bev has brought up. She's trying to explain already why dragging the chair. But again, we're going to have to define in a couple of minutes exactly what plowing is. So that's great. Maybe another question.
What about if you're pushing a baby buggy on like soil, on a mud track or something? Is that something that might be considered plowing? Obviously, we're talking about a place where there's an eruv where you can carry.
Or maybe even in your back garden if there isn't an eruv. But
there isn't
you know that for sure that you are going to create some type of, mold in the ground, as you push it through. You're going to be able to see the track.
All right, we've got them thinking. I think we should give them the answers.
So what we're going to do before we give you the answers, we're going to give you, what we try and do is we try and give you the principles, and then we sort of let you work out the answers. So these are the principles for tonight. Let me show you where we're going. So this is very exciting. We're going to show you a couple of screen shares. Our first screen share of the evening is Rabbi Ribiat in his book, in the Grey Books, puts together, took us from his book, a really beautiful explanation of, or not explanation, what am I looking for, Gila? It's not an explanation. It is not a summary, help me, someone.
A table of contents?
A table of contents of all 39 types of work. Now, if you recall, all 39 types of work that we don't do is because in the mishkan, which was almost like the temple, but before they set, when they were still in the desert. So these were the 39 types of work that they used to do over there. So he splits them into 4. There's the order of bread, the different elements that went into making bread, or according to some opinions, into making the tapestries. But it's a very similar list, from the plowing to the threshing to the kneading to the cooking. Then you've got the order of garments, the order of hides, and the order of construction. So that's really the 39 split up. Again, I'll share this all on our group afterwards, and once we'll share it afterwards. But what we're really doing now is we are going to be we're going to be working through this. Now, some of these are really short. Like you'll see over the next few weeks, some of them, we might get through one a week or even a couple of weeks. Some of them are really long. Like once you get to cooking has got a lot of laws involved. Carrying has a lot of laws involved. But that's really what we're going for. Right now, we're going for the order of bread. Now, let me share one more screen share tonight with you. If I can find it, that is. So let's show you where we are tonight. We are at carriage, which is plowing the very first. Because again, we're trying to get towards making what they were doing, making the bread or the tapestries with the dyeing. So before planting, the soil had to be prepared by loosening or softening. The seed could thus be embedded properly in the soil. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. And we're going to actually discover, once we look at this definition a little bit, that it's actually going to be much more applicable to our lives than we would have realized. It's not just for farmers, not just at all. And again, if you look afterwards, the next few weeks, we're going to have the sowing and the reaping and the sifting and things like that, and the kneading. But that's what we're going for tonight. Okay, so now again, we're stopping the screen share so we can see all of your faces in big. And anyone that's got any questions or any thoughts, please feel free to share them with us. So what we really essentially have now is we want to define what plowing is. So again, this is the first 11 melachas go through the stages of preparing bread. The first is plowing. So what is plowing? So Bev is good. What she wrote about turning soil is good. But before we even get to that, there's a stage before that. The moment you prepare the soil, you hear that? Prepare the soil for the purpose of making it more suitable for seeding or planting, you're already there. So let's just say that again. You are preparing the soil to make it more suitable for seeding or planting. That's already in halacha. That's plowing. So you are basically loosening the soil. So anything which is going to loosen the soil, intentional, not intentional, we're dealing with biblical stuff here, it's all irrelevant. The moment you've loosened the soil, you've got it ready for a seed or for soil or something like that. We've already got to the point of our malacha, of our work of plowing. Okay, and just remember, scientifically, or I don't know what you want to call it, gardening wise, how big a hole do you need to be able to put a seed into the soil? How big does that hole need to be?
Any gardeners on here?
Not me. I've never done any gardening. Just like you don't want to trust me in the kitchen. You don't want to trust me in the garden either. But does anyone want to take a guess? How big a hole are we talking about? Stephen, this is your field.
My field.
You said teeny.
Teeny.
Exactly.
Perfect. So the teeniest hole out there, we're already there. The teeniest hole. So that is the point of where we're going tonight. The teeniest hole is already going to make us, you preparing the soil for the teeniest hole, you're already going to be accountable for this. Now, we're going to go back through our questions again. And we're going to, now that we've got the principle of what it is, we're going to try and relate them. So again, do you want to go through the questions?
Okay, so can I drag a chair on mud? Thoughts, anyone? Based on what we said?
No.
Okay, we've got one vote for no. And you're right, it's not okay to drag a chair on the earth because the chair is going to it's going to scrape and loosen the soil while it's being dragged, which is really what plowing is. It's loosening the soil.
So pick your chair up, don't drag it. What about the sand pit?
Are you allowed to dig in the sand?
What about, again, I want to be clear. Remember we discussed in muksa, we discussed about sand. So usually sand could be muksa because it's nothing to do with Shabbos. However, a sand pit by default is prepared for Shabbos use. Kids go back?
I think yes.
Sorry,
you think yes.
I think you can because it's not permanent. It's not.
So,
If you-
so you're right that you can, and the reason is because is too loose to form a hole, right? If you think about being in the sand, it just kind of all falls in. But if it's wet, it could be an issue.
Not that it would ever rain in Manchester, but if it would, you'd actually have a problem. So it's interesting. It's like sand in theory is absolutely fine in terms of a sand pit. You could dig a hole in it, whereas the mud you can't.
Yeah.
However, once you get to wet sand, you've got a problem. It was actually interesting. Yesterday, we had somebody with us who used to work in a place called Gush Katif in Israel. And he was explaining to us how they grew the lettuce. It's somewhat famous, the lettuce, because lettuce, we have to check for bugs. And for Pesach, it can be a big deal, especially if you've got a big family. So again, I'm going back about 20 years, but I think he was saying that the lettuce there either doesn't need any checking because it's grown without bugs, or needs less checking, or whatever the circumstances were. But he was explaining how they grow it in sand. Apparently, again, the way that he was, at least at that point, was doing it was sand as opposed to mud. So once you get to sand, you do have a different reality, whether it is going to be loose or whether it's going to be
More solid.
More solid. Okay, so those are what we dealt with right now are the contrast of the sand, which is usually going to be okay in the sandpit to dig, as a contrast to what the chair is doing. Now we're going to move into some gardening. Fill us in with some gardening. Yeah. I'm sure you enjoy gardening.
No. Can I remove rocks or twigs from the ground? What do you think?
No. Correct. So why would that be a problem?
If you're moving the earth. Because you're moving this, you could move the soil.
Right, but even if you're not moving the soil, the point is you are making the land ready for planting. Remember, Bev said something really good at the beginning. She said you're turning the soil. So that is the problem. But you've got a problem even a stage before that. If you're getting the land ready for plowing or for preparing it, such as removing the rocks, which, by the way, are probably muktzah as well, but even without the muktzah element, you are making the land surface more comfortable. It's ready now for the planting.
Rabbi, what about weeding? Am I allowed to do that?
Weeding. Let's ask them. What about weeding?
I'd say no.
Excellent. So again, the same principle. What you're doing with weeding is you're improving the soil potential. Same sort of thing again. Gilda, do we have another?
What about fertilizing the soil? So you're not actually moving it, you're not actually plowing it, but you fertilize the earth, the ground, the soil.
It's still preparation, isn't it?
It's perfect, Richard. So that's the principle. All of these gardening things, we thought we're starting just with, if you've got your cow and you're in a field and everything else. All these gardening things are included here because you are preparing the ground for the next step of being able potentially to put the.
So would it be fair to say that you're not allowed to garden on Shabbos?
I think pretty much we're struggling to really find anything in that regard that's going to be okay. I think gardening has to get left to Sunday.
Dropping a seed into a pre-prepared hole within the soil.
No,
that would come under future weeks, I believe.
Right. So I think it's a good question, Richard. I think we're going to deal with that in the next couple of weeks. It's a good question, but
hold on to that question for the next few weeks.
We love it when
don't lose any over it.
Yeah. Placing a bean in a jar of water to sprout.
So that's not gardening, but can I do that?
A project that your kids bring home from school or something like that. Talia's brought home this beautiful bean in a jar of water. Is it okay? Is it okay now to add the bean into the jar of water? So that's also not going to be okay. So we've seen that not only is gardening out, but even anything which is going to potentially make it sprout, it's not my thing. Bev, even if it was your thing, it's going to be a problem. Okay. Now we're going to move into the final stage. We've looked at dragging the chair with mud. We've looked at digging the sandbox. We looked at the garden. We've looked at taking fun away from your kids of putting a bean into water. What we're going to deal with now, before we get to the question that Gila asked earlier, let's look at a simpler question. Gila's ready always into very, very good questions, but let's look at a straightforward, simple question. So I invite you for Shabbos. The only problem is you're going to walk out and there's mud outside the front of your house and it's wet and you're even going to have a footprint in the mud. What are we going to do? Are we trapped to our home? How do we go out knowing we're going to make a footprint in the mud?
Is it because it's kind of ancillary? It's not the main purpose of going out is to go out for lunch. And this is just a byproduct of doing that. Then it's acceptable. Okay,
so Richard is bringing up a very important principle, and I could have, in theory, dealt with these principles before we moved into the biblical laws, but I wanted to leave them out because they're complicated and we'll sort of do them as we're going along. If, let's say you were right, let's say you were correct that, I'll tell you what you've just said. You've just said you're doing a biblical law, but you don't really want it, or you're doing it for a different purpose, something like that. When it comes to even a rabbinic law, but a bit
like putting the milk back into the fridge. Like you don't really think about it. You're not. It's just something you do without thinking about or planning to do.
Okay, good. So this is the essential difference. When it came to putting the milk back, which was a thing of preparation, preparation was a rabbinic law that was never set up when it was like a robotic act. When it's a biblical law, that sort of theory doesn't help us. I'll tell you what it does. It will sometimes take it down from a biblical to a rabbinic situation, sometimes, which still will mean it's a violation of Shabbos. In that particular case, it's not even so clear that it is rabbinic, because at the end of the day, you're full force doing it. I'll give you an example of where it would take it down more. If you didn't have any intention and it wasn't necessarily going to happen. But let's say in this case, where I know it will happen, I don't necessarily want to, I know it will happen. The best case scenario, it's going to be rabbinically forbidden. So again, if you were right, but I'm going to give you I think we should give them a little hint, Gila. You are allowed to go out, not because the rabbis waived it. They wouldn't be able to waive it if it was biblically forbidden. You are allowed to walk out, even though you are going to be walking down on the mud and making holes and maybe even your footprint. The question is, why is walking out on mud different to dragging a chair on mud?
And this is going to test your gardening knowledge.
Yes, and that is very true. It's going to test the scientific element of it, and it's also going to test whether we were successful at giving over the principle of what the problem of plowing is. And I got to tell you that when I tried to understand this, it took me about a half an hour to understand the difference. It is a science, because I'm not a gardener. It's not the way my brain works. Just like I'm not a baker. What is the difference between when you walk on something and when you make a hole in something? Wait.
Give them a clue. It's 20 past 9 on a Thursday night. Give them a clue. Come on.
Fair enough. So we said that the problem of the hole was you're loosening the soil. When you step on something, you're not loosening it. You are compressing the soil. You are compacting the soil. It's a different scientific reality. The issue of plowing.
Stephen is nodding.
Yeah, he's nodding. I have no clue. I had to read this up all over the place, Hebrew English stuff, because the halacha of it and then the science of it, because I had no clue. But apparently almost does the opposite. That when you're trying to loosen it, so that's you're getting yourself ready for the seed, for the planting. But when you are compacting it, or when you are compressing it, which is what walking does, it's nothing to do with the issue of getting it ready for a seed. It's a different motion. Let's go.
So it's allowed?
It is absolutely allowed.
So what about my original question about wheeling the buggy on, or a stroller, or whatever you want to call it, on Shabbos, on soil? Is that the same principle? Is it different?
Is that a little bit worse? What do you think, guys?
That feels quite similar to dragging a chair, which is not allowed. If you wheel a buggy through soft mud, it's going to do have the same effect as dragging a chair through, which isn't allowed. So
interesting. Yeah, again, apparently,
Stephen, do you agree with that?
Just saying, is that even if you're in the Erev?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, do you agree that wheeling is the same? Has the same
Yes.
as dragging a chair?
It's
a similar sort of way of plowing. So yes.
I got to tell you, in halacha there is a difference, which is the baby carriage, the buggy is okay because they say that it's more similar to the compressing, whereas the thing is going in and it's loosening it.
Because the plowing is cutting into the soil, where the wheels are just compressing it.
Right.
So you're saying in science it's actually more similar to the foot, even though at first glance it sounds more similar to the...
Yeah, I mean, you could say that obviously walking on mud and wheeling a buggy is moulding the ground.
Yeah, I hear. I'm telling you, in halacha, they say that the walking and the baby carriage are the same and similar. There are some, this is not officially part of the notes, there are some who don't like the baby carriage when it's done side to side. They claim that could be more similar, as Richard was saying, to the chair. Like when it goes like side to side as opposed to straight. Apparently straight is more similar to walking. The one that, believe it or not, again, it's not part of our notes, this is like the bonus points, that's the most complex of all, it's still just about okay, for reasons beyond the scope of where we're going right now, is a woman's high heels, which seems to make a dot. That's still just about okay, according to most. But of all of these things, that was the most problematic. Nevertheless, that was still okay, just about. Maybe we should just sum up what we've said tonight.
So we are not allowed to plow on Shabbos.
How does plowing apply to us?
Which means prepare any action that will prepare soil for planting. Most commonly comes up for us, whether if you're gardening, if you're doing stuff like plowing or weeding or removing rocks, etc., or if you're not gardening, but if you're dragging furniture through soil, etc. But you are allowed to walk and wheel a buggy on Shabbos.
Right, and the difference is whether you're loosening it or whether you're compressing it. So there you go. We thought the plowing has nothing to do with us, but we've discovered how it's very relevant.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. You can get in touch with me. You can find me on Instagram. It's Gila Ross. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.